All right, take two because I screwed up the first time. But we're going to be talking about Bauhaus, the goth rock icons. Today, they were formed by Daniel Ash, Peter Murphy, Kevin Haskins, and David J. in Northampton, England in 1978. And as for the roles of the people in the band, Daniel Ash did the guitar and the saxophone. Peter Murphy was mostly the vocalist, although he occasionally played some other instruments. Kevin Haskins was on drums, and David J. was on bass. So they're still widely known for their 1979 debut single, Bela Lugosi's Dead, considered among the earliest goth rock songs. And other singles followed, including two of my faves. You had Dark Entries and The Passion of Lovers as my primary examples of songs that make the band great. And the emblem of the German art school Bauhaus was used by the band, originally designed by Oskar Schlemmer in 1922, and it's been useful for their promotion of their music, on posters and record sleeves. I would assume on T-shirts, baseball caps, and all that kind of stuff. Well, do goths even wear baseball caps? I don't know. Are there like goth fashion rules like that? Or would it be like a cool thing to rebel against, gothic fashions by having a baseball cap? I don't know how that works exactly. But, moving on, Bauhaus released their debut album in the Flat Field in 1980, which was one of the first goth rock albums, though detectable themes of doom and gloom certainly existed in music before, including rock music. So it would be a stretch to say they absolutely invented, these goth themes and moods in the rock genre. Of course, it would be fair to say that they helped cement what are considered gothic sensibilities and music. Personally, I would say The Mercy Seat by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds sounds like it could have been inspired by Bauhaus. And I'm not saying it was, for people out there who might get argumentative and say, no, you're a dummy, you're a dumbass, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I'm just saying I could totally imagine that it could have been influenced by them. And in fact, it even sounds a bit like a Bauhaus song. And obviously it's a great song in its own right if you're a fan of that kind of music. I'm just saying that it sounds like Nick Cave was definitely influenced by this band. That's all I'm saying. So Bauhaus had plenty of influences that are not entirely gothy as well. In fact, that's even detectable in some of their songs because you can tell there's some reggae influence at times. And there were even other gothy bands that arrived before Bauhaus on the musical scene. You had Susie and the Banshees as one of the more obvious examples. And I don't know to what extent they actually had sort of a gothy style at first, because I've heard some early Susie and the Banshees songs that were a little bit more like a conventional punk sort of sound. But I think there was some cross influential stuff happening. Plus, of course, there is some room for debate over what exactly goth entails anyway. For example, the Dead Kennedys have some rather gothy and dark humor moments. And of course, you could even say that bands like The Clash, who influenced Bauhaus, would occasionally dabble in darker moods or sounds. And The Clash are typically considered not goth. I know some people are going to be like, wait, the Clash are not goth at all, yada yada yada. I know that, but you can kind of hear some elements of it in songs like the Guns of Brixton, I would say. I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch, I admit it, but I think I think you can kind of hear some gothy elements even in non-goth music. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully. So after touring Bauhaus' second album, Mask was released in 1981, and it expanded the instruments employed by the band. And I would say that if you add instruments other than just bass and guitar and drums, you're probably on your way to sounding not as much like a punk band, you know? You might sound more like a post punk band or new wave or gothy in this case. So that's one of the ways to actually move further away from the punk genre and, become more associated with the subgenre. And of course, it's also debatable about exactly what punk is as well. Of course, I mean, there are some bands out there who basically are like punk rock, but of course, they are not really lumped together in that genre that much. And their third album, called The Sky's Gone Out, peaked at number 3 on the UK albums chart in 1982, which means it was a commercial and critical success. So this band is obviously pretty well known. They're not ultra obscure or anything like that, so they don't really get that much underground cred. But I do think that anytime you talk about, a subgenre, it's not going to really be quite at the tippy top. And in 1983, the band broke up due to singer Peter Murphy being absent due to an illness that I won't bother talking about here. And their album Burning from the Inside was still released, and it apparently had minimal input from Peter Murphy, which is why they parted ways, at least for a moment. And it pays to mention that Bauhaus had an extensive influence outside of strictly music. So you got outside and strictly mixed up. But for example, the character Eric Draven, also known as the Crow, is said to be facially inspired by Peter Murphy, which is kind of interesting. I enjoy the movie The Crow. I don't know when I first heard this little factoid, but it is kind of, it's interesting that you could start a band and part of your influence will actually be your image. So obviously a band like Bauhaus is going to be notable for that aspect too, the whole style thing. And of course, punk rock, had the whole debate over, is punk rock a style more than it is like the actual substance of the music or the substance of the culture. Like, is it really just a fashion sense that you could like buy at a store or whatever? And that's one of my ongoing jokes about goth culture really is that, I want to be a goth, but I can't have a successful run at the Hot Topic because there are none where I live. I guess I'd have to order all my goth accessories from Walmart or something like that. But Bauhaus actually makes an appearance in the Tony Scott film The Hunger, and in the 1980s horror movie Night of the Demons, the character of Angela dances to the great song Stigmata Martyr. And that's one of those movies that it's like a so bad it's good kind of thing. And it's just another example of how influential the band is. They have appeared, in various movies and stuff. And I don't hear them very often on the radio or anything, but people know about the band. There are 2 great compilation albums of Bauhaus that I recommend personally. So there's one called Bauhaus 1979 through 1983, and another one is called Swing the Heartache, the BBC sessions. Now that one, for whatever reason, is a little bit harder to find. I actually found it on a cassette tape at a thrift store of all places, and it normally doesn't have stuff like that for sale there. But I did find it, And it turns out it's actually not so easy to find in other places. Like, I don't think it's available on Amazon Music, as an example. And it might be on YouTube. Like, the whole album might be there. I'm not really sure. But really, if I was to narrow their musical output to two albums worth hearing, I might suggest that 1979 through 83 compilation and Swing the Heartache. They're worth it, and they feature songs from, the and pretty much the entire span of their 1970s and 80s era career, if you want to put it that way. And you can feel free to listen to anything else by the band, of course. And they even have 5 different live albums that you can choose from. So, go hog wild, feed your Bauhaus fix if you're so inclined. And there is even a Bauhaus musical called March of the Pigs, recently announced for Broadway in the United States. Okay, I'm just kidding about that one. And March of the Pigs is actually a Nine Inch Nails song. That was really just a test for you people out there. So how goth are you? How well versed are you in goth history? Although, interestingly enough, there are some pretty decent collaborations between Peter Murphy and Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. You can see some of these videos on YouTube. And obviously, I could get into some biography kind of stuff. But really, all I need to say is that this band had origins in the 1970s. They broke up in 1983. They went back together again briefly in the late 1990s. And then they reunited yet again from 2005 to 2008. And they apparently, went again to collaborate from 2019 to the present day, apparently. So this is not a band that has broken up forever. I think, as time goes on, they've realized that, hey, we've got a legacy here. Let's try to make this work. Let's at least go on tours. And I'm not sure. I should actually look at what their latest album is. I'm not really sure when that was released. I'm gonna look it up quickly here now. Bum, 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 bum. God damn it! Where's the discography? When was their last album? Oh, it was in 2008. So they apparently haven't really put out new material since 2008 for whatever reason. But they're still touring, so make of that what you will. And really, that's about all I have to say about them. And have a nice day and stay spooked. It's Halloween season, baby. Unless you're listening to this after Halloween 2022. But you know what? Halloween can be any day anyway.